guys.
So how are you? Yeah.
Is he here?
Yeah.
Gonna be here for a while.
Happy about this?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Hope so.
Will we like to go over there?
I'm from the crew.
Oh, okay.
These are work. Got.
That's good.
Yeah.
She said she doesn't want to be in the camera line tonight.
I'll make it.
We're just waiting for Robin to come back. She wants to do the sign and she's
My sister worked for the state. She's been retired now for 4 or 5 years. And she's in Fort Lauderdale. She retired when she was 44. She got in early and
Insurance. All of
that's, you know,
that's what counts.
she did disability determination.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I know we all have busy schedules right after work. We appreciate your interest in what's going on. So this is obviously the informational meeting we're holding for the Casella Waste Facility. And I'm sure you have a lot of questions, and this meeting is to answer those questions. So we encourage you to make sure you ask whatever's on your mind, and we want to be able to answer it as best as we can. I ask you to hold off just for a little while we just kind of set the table and talk about, just kind of establish what's going on. So I just want to, Senator Goby wanted to hold this meeting to really be the liaison from the state, bringing Mass DEP, so we can have this discussion together. I want to recognize Representative Durant for being here as well. We have the chairman of the Board of Health, Matt Gagner. We have John McGrath, the selectman. We have Mary Ju Pigsley and Kevin Dowse from the Mass DEP. We have Robin Craver. We have the Board of Health here as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Senator Goby.
okay. And I'll be brief. Thank you very much. First of all, I do want to say thank you for the town for hosting, and as well as working with Peter and I and Paul as well on these issues. A special thanks to DEP. I know that as legislators we've had a lot of calls and emails, and I thank you for that, because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the residents wanting to get involved and to make sure that we knew what was going on. And every time that I have called Mary Jude over at DEP, or sent an email, they have got back to me right away, and I know that that's been the same for Representative Durant. We've had chances to go in and sit down in the Worcester office, and they have always been very, very good to work with. I appreciate you taking the time to be here tonight as well. And for the folks, I can't even imagine what you guys are going through. A few years back I had an opportunity, I traveled with a group to Haiti to work at a medical clinic. So when you go to Haiti, you go to a third world country, you expect to have problems with water, right? I don't expect it 7 miles from my house. I don't expect what you folks are going through, and not knowing what's next. It's clean today, it's dirty tomorrow, what's it going to be next week, what's it going to be next month, and not even, never mind the inconvenience that you're going through, but to have that over your heads and not knowing what's going on. And I think, Peter and I have made it pretty clear what we want. We want to see Casella do the right thing. We want to see a water line. That's what we want. We want you not to have to live the way that you're living right now. But it's going to take some time to get to that point. It will take some time. So tonight we want to make sure that you had an opportunity, because we have been receiving so many emails, we've been receiving the calls, And we wanted to bring in the folks that know this the best, and that's the DEP, to be able to get some answers from them. I see that there's a lot of folks that are here from Sturbridge, because I'm sure that next we'll probably be asking for a meeting in the town of Sturbridge as well, to address some of the concerns that the folks there have too. I'm going to ask Representative Durant to say a few things. I'm going to be here listening, and again, you know, this isn't the end of anything. This is just getting this dialogue going, and to make sure that we're all on the same page, because I think it's important, so that we know the best way that we can advocate for you.
So I just will echo some of Senator Goby's sentiments. I met with a lot of you over the last couple of years, I guess, about this issue. And this has been one of the major issues for Charlton and for myself and Senator Goby as well. And look, this water line is, for me, my #1 priority for this town. I need to get this water line in. We need to get you guys the water that you deserve. As Ann said, I can't imagine what it's like to have to wonder if your water is contaminated. We look at the charts over here on the wall and see that one day they show up something, then maybe they don't, or they haven't for a while, and you don't know if, you know, we test 3 months from now and it shows up and you've been drinking contaminated water for 3 months. You can't water a garden, you can't do a number of different things. So this is really important to us. I want to thank the folks from DEP for coming out. Representative Frost is on his way here. He said that he was going to be late. He apologizes. He had another commitment. You know, this is something that we need to do. We need to get this information out. We need to make sure that you all have the information. It may not always be the answers that you want to hear, but I do need you to know that we are committed to making sure that we get this resolved. And so I'm going to be just wrapping it up. I'm interested to hear and have you hear what DEP has to say. And I always start whenever I have a meeting. If you've been in meetings with me before, and my chief of staff, Ann Godreau, will laugh, is I take my notes on my phone. So it may look like I'm texting, but I really am not. I'm really paying attention and taking notes on my phone. But people will say like, geez, he's texting during a meeting, but I'm not. So anyway, I'll turn it over back to John. Thank you.
And thank you so much for coming out here and for requesting this meeting. But I'll hand it over to Mary Jo Pixley from Mass DEP to really explain a couple of the processes and what's going on.
Sure. Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. We really appreciate it. I am not taking notes on my phone. I'm very old school. It's paper and pencil. So Kevin Doust is here with me. He is the section chief for our emergency response section of our Bureau of Wayside Cleanup. Paul Locke snuck in the back. Paul is our assistant commissioner for the Bureau of Wayside Cleanup in our Boston office, and has just a tremendous wealth of experience in the 21E program and with difficult sites such as this one. So Paul is part of our team who can answer questions. I want to thank very specifically the legislators here tonight. They have been so engaged with DEP, with this process, with highly technical information that we have been sending to them at their request and having meetings to explain it. And I think their understanding is pretty close to our understanding at this point because of the level of involvement that we've had. So I appreciate that. We are happy to hear your concerns. We're glad to be here tonight. We've received a lot of correspondence. We've tried to answer the questions as they come up. What I wanted to do was provide a very brief sort of summary of Mass DEP's regulatory authority, because some of the questions that come up, it's going to need to be in the context of what DEP can and can't do under our statute. The statute I'm talking about is the 21E statute. It's our cleanup statute. What it does is set up a system of liability for contaminated sites that is strict, joint, and several to the Commonwealth. And that's a really important backdrop, because what that means is, as far as liability to the Commonwealth goes, it is strict liability. It's no fault. It doesn't matter if you did something or you didn't do something. It's status liability. If you're the owner or the operator at a site at or from which contamination has come to be located, you are responsible, period. So there's no questions asked. There's no burden on Mass DEP to prove things, to say that somebody was present on a site for this amount of time, or somebody used these chemicals at a site. That's not relevant to a party's liability to us. And those parties are, we call them PRPs, potentially responsible parties. I try really hard when we're talking not to start with what we call the TLAs, three-letter acronyms. It's pretty much everything we have is a three-letter acronym. But I think a lot of you have been engaged in this, and you know some of them. So the PRPs are those people who are strictly, jointly, and severally liable. The other part of it means is that they're all liable together, or any one of them can be liable to us for the whole thing. So it's strict liability and it's joint and several liability. And that's really important for our legal authority, and that's why sites get cleaned up. It's modeled after the Federal Superfund program, and it means that there's not a lot of time spent by the regulators having to sort it out. It means that the sites are going to get cleaned up faster. It's not the kind of old-fashioned command and control, you shall do this, you shall have a permit that does that. It's a privatized system that relies on licensed site professionals, LSP is another three-letter acronym. The licensed site professionals are responsible for determining the cleanup. There's a requirement that people notify us of certain reportable conditions. And then they get an LSP, and they go through this process of assessing the conditions. They have to determine both the nature and the extent of the contamination. They have to evaluate the remedies that are available, then they have to implement those remedies and achieve a condition of no significant risk. Those decisions are made by the LSP according to a timeline that's set forth in our regulations. DEP does retain an audit function. We audit sites set out in our regulations, which ones we do. So we do check the LSPs, but the LSPs are the ones who make the decisions, who come up with both the assessment and then the solutions to the problem at a particular site. Some issues do require more DEP oversight. And one of those things is an immediate response action, an IRA. One of the things that triggers an IRA is a condition where there is a critical exposure pathway, a CEP. I think probably one of us tonight will say a sentence that is only composed of letters. So if you have a critical exposure pathway, one of those things can be private well with an occupied residence with a private well that has detectable contamination. That's the situation here. That's what triggered the immediate response action because of the contamination in these private wells. What the potentially responsible parties have an obligation to do under the IRA is to prevent, eliminate, or mitigate that critical exposure pathway. So that's the standard that they have to meet with us. There are some exceptions to conditions that have to be reported to DEP. And one of them that's important to this matter is things that are adequately regulated by another program at DEP. So hazardous waste transporters, solid waste facilities like the landfill, public drinking water supplies are considered by the 21E program to be adequately regulated because some other part of DEP is setting limits and maintaining monitoring. What we have done, and if there are questions, Paul can speak to this, is when we have an IRA condition, such as this critical exposure pathway because of private wells, we have been saying, for those purposes, that facility, that landfill, in this case, is not adequately regulated under the solid waste regulations anymore. That does need to go into this 21E system and to have an immediate response action planned and performed, as I said, to prevent, eliminate, or mitigate the risk posed by that exposure. So that's the sort of overview of the regulations that get us here. So in my office, what we have is staff from the solid waste program and the 21E program working together, actually a lot of staff working together, because our landfill staff have been living with this landfill for many years. They know the monitoring well network, they know the history of the various expansions, and obviously the 21E program is managing, the IRA conditions. One of the ways to mitigate the exposure from drinking water, this critical exposure pathway, is the provision of bottled water. And that's what has been going on in this case, or the point of entry treatment systems, the whole house treatment systems, depending on the nature of the contaminant in the specific wells. The IRA requires that and also requires continually assessing the conditions, and they have to provide us with status reports about that ongoing assessment. So as part of that, I think as everybody knows, we have required as part of the assessment activity, anytime there is a detection in a private well, an assessment 500 feet out from that well to make sure that we are seeing everything at that point in time that is related to what we're seeing in the initial well. Since the July sampling results came out and we had new detections and increased detections where we had already seen some of these contaminants, the provision of public water, the private bottled water, or Poet Systems has expanded, I think, to 14 homes at this point in time. We also have directed Casella to increase the frequency of the monitoring of the private wells now so that there's not a 3-month gap anymore between when they look and then the next time they look and you don't know what's happening. We're requiring that to happen monthly at this point. So by the end of September, there will be another round of testing, and then that will continue as part of the ongoing assessment for the IRA activities. That will continue monthly. If you have questions, part of your questions are about the IRA plan and that kind of stuff. Kevin is the person who has memorized all 604 pages of it, and we can take those questions. If there is something that we have to go back and look up, we'll do that. If we can't answer it tonight, we'll go back, we'll read through the volumes of documents that we have on this, and we'll get back to you with that. All of the documents are available on our website, which you probably know. If you enter the release tracking number, you can click through and there are live links and you can see all of the documents that are available. So we read the 604-page report. I didn't read all of it. I read most of it, but Kevin read all of it. We noted the assessment activities they had done, they described in there. We noted their conclusion that the Southbridge landfill is not the source of contamination in the wells. And I can tell you tonight that DEP's assumption has been and continues to be that the Southbridge landfill is the likely source of this contamination. We reviewed the information. We met with Casella. We told them we did not agree with their conclusions. We formed a team within our office of 6 or 7 geologists and hydrogeologists to go through and review all of this information and to come up with where we thought the information was lacking. A very short, simple view is we feel that they have looked at a lot of things, but they haven't looked at the right things. They haven't looked in the right places. This contamination is very, very deep in the wells, 500 to 600 feet deep in some of the drinking water wells. The extent of the investigation that they have done has been in the overburden soils and the shallow bedrock. So they're not really looking in the right place to draw any conclusions. And we have said that to them. We have also asked our colleagues at the state geologist's office to take a look at the data that they've developed. And we've contacted the USGS, the United States Geological Survey, who has very graciously asked one of their landfill hydrogeologists, so a person who is particularly expert at not just hydrogeology, what's going on with the water in the rock, but what happens when you have a landfill on top of the water in the rock. So we are expecting people to have coordinated all of their conclusions in the next week or so. And that reminds me, I should have said this in the beginning. Mark Baldy, whose name I think everybody knows has been corresponding with, Mark is leading this whole effort, and he could not be here tonight, but he really is the person who's been coordinating all this, reaching out, using his relationships to get this expert help for us. Kevin has a relationship with a professor at WPI and has reached out to that person who is also taking a look at the information for us, and we're going to have the benefit of his review as well. So what the LSP concluded based on the investigation that they did was that they don't have to do any more IRA activities, including a feasibility analysis that would be part of that to close out the IRA because it's not the landfill. So we don't agree with that. We don't agree that they have established a lack of a hydrogeological connection between the contamination that's at the landfill and the contamination of the same nature that is at the private wells. And we have said you cannot file with that information an IRA completion statement. We do not believe that you can be finished. That is not an acceptable outcome. I spoke with some people at Casella yesterday and today, and they are not planning to file an IRA completion statement, which I believe is the right decision for them to have made. Once we collect up our information, we're going to have a meeting with them and their experts, probably the first week of October, given what people's schedules are, and walk through what we believe our recommendations are for the work that they have yet to do. Up until, I guess, yesterday, I think there had been some communications that the bottled water would be discontinued at the end of the month. They will not be discontinuing the water at the end of the month. The water will continue at least through the end of the year. They have now engaged an engineering firm who's going to develop a cost estimate for the construction of the water line, which I think in the last couple of days, maybe because this meeting had been scheduled, we had some very productive conversations. The question has come up, and I'm sure will come up tonight, why doesn't DEP just require them to put in the water line now? Why are we having this conversation about a feasibility study? So back to that statutory authority, the statute doesn't tell us we can make people do things. Under the IRA provisions, we can require a feasibility study. But again, the LSP is responsible for assessing the site, coming up with what the remedial alternatives could be, giving us that feasibility analysis, which includes both technical feasibility and a cost-benefit analysis, and then telling us what they think would be the outcome. So we are requiring that feasibility investigation as part of the IRA. At this point in time, we are not directing construction of a water line. And actually, at this point, we don't really have any information other than what could be one of two routes that would connect the South Bridgewater to Charlton, but we have no information about subsurface conditions like bedrock. We have no information from them about what they think it's going to cost. So they do have this engineering firm engaged. I think there have been conversations with others, not with DEP, about what potential costs may be, but we don't have any of that information right now. I think people might also have some questions about the landfill permitting, the expansion permitting that's going on. The same problem we have with the lack of information about the groundwater in the deep bedrock is a problem for the landfill permitting. So without an understanding of what's going on under the landfill that exists and under the expansion part of the landfill, we are not able to evaluate their permit applications. And we have sent these deficiency letters out to them. People may have seen those, saying that your applications lack the necessary detail for us to take action on them at this time. Please go and develop this extensive groundwater information that we need to make those decisions. In one of the email messages we got, someone said, I understand that you've made preliminary approval of the landfill. I'm really not sure where that came from because we have not done anything like that. And if you've reviewed the extensive comments we filed as part of the NEPA process, there is nothing that is even close to approval, preliminary or otherwise. So that's the sort of really broad overview, and what we would like to do is answer some specific questions. Mark Baldy's email, I think, tried to answer some of the ones that we have received already. We can elaborate on that. Hopefully this puts everything into context. But on sort of a personal note, I just want to say I appreciate the time that people have spent giving us these comment letters. They're obviously well thought out letters. They're asking us specific questions, not just sort of complaining that DEP is not doing anything. It's been helpful to have some of your questions, and it's given us things to think about and then go back and ask our own questions. Some of you have acknowledged our efforts in those letters, which really means a lot to us, and I very much appreciate that, because we have a lot of people working on this project. Kevin is our emergency response section chief. Kevin and his team respond to fires, highway accidents, things like that. Kevin spends about 95% of his time right now on this project. So it's a significant resource effort that we're undertaking on this because it is a really difficult situation. There aren't easy answers on this one, there's nothing simple about this, but we're working hard, spending a lot of resources to try to figure it out. And if we can't answer your question tonight, we'll take it back, we'll find the people who can figure it out, and we will get back directly to people. And I think what we could do is tell Robin what the answers are, and if there's a distribution list, I don't know if you have a distribution list at this point. Yeah, so we can communicate back to you all that way.
Thank you, and before we open it up, I just want to give a chance to the Chairman of the Board of Health. Matt, if you wanted to say a few words before.
Thanks, Joe. I was gonna wait till the questions were asked. I have a couple of questions or concerns. One is pertaining, and I'm not saying you guys have the answer, it's just my concern, but one is pertaining to that courtesy bottled water program that has now been extended to December. Our board has had to ask every time, and we get it down to the last minute for the extension of that courtesy bottled water. Beg, pleading, doing everything we have to do to get that extended. And I was quite frank with Casella at the time and said, I don't care if I have to ask you every day, just don't ever let it run out. And they have not let it run out, which I've been grateful for. The concern that I'm hearing from the residents is that the courtesy bottled water is supplement. So it's not adequate for a lot of residents. And I'm just, don't know if there's anything we can do to try and have the residents feel that sense that while the big picture is being worked on, that the courtesy bottled water situation could be addressed and looked at. I know, Kevin, you and I have gone back and forth and all that, so we know that your hands are tied to a certain point, but that's one of the Board of Health's main concerns is this potential critical exposure pathway. You know, you talked about the 5 new, some new cases that came up. 2 of those people were on the courtesy bottled water program. There was a third that was on that opted not to engage in that, but at least it was available to them. The second question, and I don't even know if it's going to go directly to your office or not, but the Board of Health has reached out a couple of times, and we're concerned about the detention ponds that are in our town, and as far as site assignment for our board, if those detention ponds are going to stay. So those are my 2 concerns that I had.
Well, I think I can answer the courtesy, the bottled water question. I'm in, excuse me, pretty regular conversations with Sam, as well as you and Gary. Sam Nicolai, the Director of Engineering at Casella. And oftentimes I'm, as like you said, very frank with them about this is what we want, this is what we can require, this is what we can't require, but this is what we're urging. One of the discussions I had with them was about the courtesy water, and that if they're offering the water, they need to offer enough water. And what the response has been is that they understand that, and they're making available whatever the needs are. They can offer it, and if you need more water, ask, because that's the message that I got back from Casella. If you're running out of water for whatever you need it for, then just go ahead and ask.
You can ask our office.
Ask Tracy, ask your office. That should not. They echoed that shouldn't be an issue.
And there was one person who was on the bottled water who mistakenly got a notice that she was being discontinued and recalled, and that was definitely just a mistake. So that's definitely reach out on the adequacy of the water. Yeah. On the site assignment issue, I can go into that. I don't know if Robin and I spoke a little bit about this. I provided some of the paperwork kind of background of that. Site assignment is a complicated and very long process for siting a solid waste facility of any kind, of a landfill, transfer station. There are things that are under our regulations pertinent to landfills that also have to be part of the site assignment from the local Board of Health. The local Board of Health issues the site assignment based on a site suitability report that comes from DEP. So there is a detention basin in Charlton that is appurtenant to the landfill on non-site assigned land, because there is no site assignment in Charlton anywhere for the landfill, that is there because of an emergency situation. It was constructed as part of a settlement back in 2004 for some pretty serious violations at the existing landfill by Casella's predecessor in interest called Wood Recycling Inc. It was a very large $1.1 million settlement, I think, with the AG's office for violations of air quality control regulations, wetlands regulations, and solid waste regulations. Part of that was to improve the stormwater capacity, which led to the construction of Basin Z3. In 2014, I believe, there was a very significant slump of soils from within Charlton, not part of the landfill, just a huge soil stockpile that slid down the hill, took out mature trees, filled up a wetland. Part of the second Attorney General case, continued operation of that detention basin was needed to keep the stormwater flowing and not to have the wetland damage that would be caused if there was no place for the water to go when it comes down. So, yes, detention basins are appurtenances to landfills, and I keep saying that because we have heard many times from Casella's lawyers that they're not appurtenant. They are appurtenant. They are appurtenant. They are appurtenant. Robert has a document in which we said that in writing a long time ago, in the 90s, I believe. DEP does have the discretion, though, in some instances where there's a need, to say that something that is appurtenant can go on a non-site assigned piece of land. And in this instance, for that single basin, we have made that determination, that it continues to be necessary to have stormwater go to Basin Z3, or there will be environmental consequences. So, I don't know if that's too much jibber jabber, but that's the site assignment story.
Okay, thank you.
I can also add some information to that. So you have two issues about some of the complaints and questions that I've heard about the basins that are over the line in the town of Charlton proper. And the two issues that we have to look at is, as Mary Jude was talking about, a site assignment, and should there be a site assignment if they are two instances, which they are. The other issue is, are they operating in the town of Charlton against, as a zoning violation? And our zoning enforcement officer is conflicted, as he's in a butter, and he has recused himself from looking at this issue. The Board of Selectmen, and we have found they have appointed an alternate building commissioner. We're very happy that the building commissioner in the town of Lexington has come down. He's taken a tour. They appointed him as an alternate. He has toured the landfill, and he is in the process of writing up his determination at this time. I expect that determination to be mailed out by the beginning of next week. It's just being finalized. So those are the two issues. We are working on that, and you should do something shortly on that.
Okay, does anyone have any questions?
I'm from Southbridge, and I'm not hearing what you said here. I don't think Southbridge is living in a bubble, and they're in denial that what you said about the extension, about the landfill, about everything. If you go to a Board of Health in Southbridge, none of that exists. Everything is okay, and they're all moving forward. My question is, can you come to Southbridge and speak to our Board of Health with this same type of authority that you have here? Because we've got a stacked Board of Health. I go to Sturbridge, everything is like this. We go to Charlton, everything is nice and open like this. Southbridge is living in denial about that there's anything wrong. They think they're moving ahead with the extension, and they're denying that there's any problem. And I don't know if this is a question, but I don't think this landfill should be categorized when it appears in another town. No, we're looking for it in Charlton, we're looking for it somewhere else. It's in Southbridge, it's all in Southbridge. And I hate the determination to be, well, when it gets to Charlton, it's bad. It's okay that it's in Southbridge, they asked for it. We didn't. We never voted for it. the biggest poison is in Southbridge. We don't have to look in a well, it's all right there. And I don't know, can you come to Southbridge and have the same kind of a meeting and let this, and find out what our Board of Health is doing? Because they're not really doing anything for us, and we're treated very coldly there, not like this.
Absolutely.
Please.
We've been to Sturbridge.
We need an
We'll go back to
emergency,
Sturbridge.
we need an emergency meeting just like this. And if you can do that, then you've answered my question, because they're in 100% total denial. I haven't missed a meeting in 15 years. And they're not like this at all. I'm very upset about it to hear. And it's so nice to be in a town where everybody agrees that poison is bad and water is good.
Robin, did you want to say something?
I just did want to clarify, when we talk about expansion, there's been a discussion about expansion in Southbridge and expansion in Charlton. There is no expansion in Charlton at this time. Casella has withdrawn that request. So when we talk about expansion right now, it's just in the town of Southbridge. So I just wanted to be clear on that.
Is that just land in Southbridge, right?
Only in the land in Southbridge, and yes, it's on the other side of
Sir?
Charlton.
Since 2009, there's been MCL exceedances of VOCs at the landfill and the monitoring wells. I'm wondering what is actually being done to remediate the complete site at the landfill that has all the contamination at the landfill. It's not in question, it's there. Is any of that covered under this IRA? I don't believe it is, right?
It is not.
So-
So that gets into the whole adequately regulated thing. So groundwater monitoring wells are typically set up in a circle around a landfill to monitor for those things. The solid waste regulations, solid waste permit would dictate any actions that would be taken for that. The transition into the 21E program is because of the contamination in the private well. So contamination in a monitoring well is not treated the same as contaminated in a private well, which does have that element of exposure to people. I don't know, Paul, if you want to talk about adequately regulated or add anything to that. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Well, I think you described the adequately regulated kind of regulations. The purpose, to take a step back, is not to pass it to one program or the